Hey guys, Ben here, we are the Bid Guys, welcome to World of Tanks Tip of the Week, Part 5, Defending the Flag. So defending your team's flag can be a critical part of any battle in World of Tanks, and there's a few subtleties around the game mechanics that it's useful to know to help you do this. Now I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just give a few pointers and tips that hopefully will be able to help you reset the cap for your team and maybe win some more battles. And so the first thing to know is that any damage to an enemy tank will completely reset that tank's capture points. So assuming there's just one tank in the capture circle, he's going to sit there and gradually accumulate capture points until that time hits 0. And when that time hits 0, he has hit 100 capture points. So if he's on 1 capture point or 100, so there's a minute and a half left or there's 1 second left, if you hit them for 1 damage, it will all be gone, either way. So as well as being able to do that just with small amounts of damage, you can also do that with module damage. So if you can't damage someone but you track them, that will still reset the cap. And likewise, if you damage their gun or their viewport or whatever, that will completely reset the cap. Now that's pretty useful to know, but the way you can really use that to your advantage is through the use of HE ammunition. And so if you're not really familiar with HE shells, I don't tend to use them very often and don't often find them that great, but what they're good at is doing splash damage, high explosive ammunition. So they're very low penetration generally, high damage and a bit of splash. And so what that means is you don't need to penetrate the enemy to do damage to them. You can hit someone, not penetrate, and still just do a very tiny amount of damage through splash. And so generally when I'm trying to break the cap and I'm heading towards it, I'll load up an HE shell, find the tank, hit them, and even if it hits them for 10 damage instead of my normal shells that might do 300 damage, it's going to reset the cap just as effectively. And if you're on 5 or 10 seconds left, then it's worth doing, because if I hit them, if I find my normal ammunition and it bounces, then it won't reset the cap and they could win. So here's a couple of examples of me doing just that in battles. So here we are on Sand River, I'm in my T44 and you can see down the bottom I've got normal ammo loaded. Then I switch it onto premium ammo for a second. I'm thinking, okay, premium ammo, that's going to give me a higher chance to penetrate. Probably worthwhile. And then I realise, no, HE is the way to go. So we've got 15 seconds left here. I'm not sure what the tank on the cap is, but we want to make sure we do some damage. And there he is. He's a Tiger 2. Fire the HE shell. It's a low damage roll, but 122 completely resets the cap and puts it back to 95 seconds or 100 seconds. And so that's tip 1, that you should use HE shells to help reset the cap. And so one of the other things that's useful to know is that if there are multiple tanks capping the flag, once you've shot one of those tanks, their capture points are going to be reset to 0, but the other tanks are still going to be on whatever they were on before. So if you've got 2 enemy tanks capping your flag, rather than turning up and just shooting one of them until they're dead, focusing fire like you would in a normal fight, it's generally best to alternate fire between the two. So shoot tank A first, reload, shoot tank B, because then you're going to reset both of their capture points down to 0. It's also worth keeping in mind that it's generally better to shoot the tank that's been capping for the longest first. So if there's 2 tanks capping your flag and one of those has been sitting there for a minute and one of those just turned up 5 seconds ago, if you know who's been there the longest, shoot that guy, because he could be on 80 or 90 capture points, the other guy might only have 5. And if you put a shot on the guy who's only been there 5 seconds, you'll notice that the capture clock's hardly going to change at all. So it might go from like 5 seconds to 10 seconds left, and then you barely have time to reload and try. Whereas if you shoot the guy who's been there a long time, you could reset it back to a minute, and then you've got plenty of time to play with. Another little snippet of information that's pretty useful to know is that 3 tanks is the maximum for capturing a flag. And what I mean by that is that once you've got 3 tanks in the circle, that's as quick as the clock is going to go. You can have more tanks in there, but the clock won't go any quicker if you've got 4 or 5 or 6 or 15 tanks in the cap circle. 3 will make the clock go at the fastest speed that it can. And one last pointer that's kind of specific to artillery. If you're getting capped out and you're in artillery in your team and you can get a shot in the capture circle and the enemy's not spotted, it's always worth putting in a few blind shots. Look for obvious places where you would park if you were trying to hide from artillery. People are often positioned by hard cover. If there's a rock or a building, they'll tuck in next to that. Or if there's a bush or a dead tank, they might try and sit behind that. So if you're in a desperate situation and none of your team are there to spot them, start throwing down some blind fire, because you only need to do a tiny bit of splash damage or blow their tracks out and that'll reset the cap. So that's just a few really basic little tips. I hope some of you guys find that useful. Certainly some things that I found useful learning over the time that I spent playing World of Tanks. If you did find it useful at all, please consider dropping a like on the video or subscribing to the channel, and check out some of the other videos in this series because there's a whole bunch of tips in there. Nice one. I've been Ben, we're the Beard Guys, and I'll catch you next time.